Okay. So, did you understand all that? The politics of provision of this affordable housing?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Sorry?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yes, correct. So we are looking at MADA policies, and we will be looking at SRA policies also, but maybe not so much in detail. But your syllabus has actually, your syllabus talks about all housing policies, so we can go ahead and do MADA and SRA both in detail. Not an issue. So MADA for sure will be covering up, because MADA's, like I said, got into this FSI incentivization as of now. Yeah, so we're definitely going to look into that. So what MADA did earlier in terms of provision of housing, and now how MADA is tackling the situation by entering into joint ventures with the developers, and how it mandates the developer to give one component, certain percentage of that housing to the affordable sector. So either he constructs and gives it in the same plot, adjacent ward, whatever it is. He has to sell a certain number of units to MADA, affordable housing, and but that's not being feasible. Like I said, so when we probably do, just for your general knowledge, a kind of a feasibility study, this thing overview, we can probably try and understand why it's not being feasible for this model is, not working out. Of course, builders are not very happy about it, so they're not taking efforts to make it work. But yeah, it's not working. And right now, real estate has come to a sort of almost a standstill or grinding halt. It was already in the doldrums prior to Corona and whatever, demonetization. I think demonetization was one hard blow that real estate took, right? So like I said, when we're talking about these neo-dirigistic policies, demonetization comes first, right? where the government took everything in his hands. It decided that from tomorrow there's going to be no cash. And you know that the real estate market generates a lot of cash, uses a lot of cash, there's a lot of cash in circulation, right? So even when we're looking at banks today, I don't know how much you guys are interested in finance. At the end of fifth year, we can do one class on finance, but the government looks at what is called as quantitative easing. You should know these terms, okay? You guys, you can thoda show off करने के लिए इधर उधर लगा सकते हो. So the government looks at what is called as quantitative easing, which is putting cash back in the flow, okay? So how do you do that? And those are the steps. Then that's why the government keeps increasing repo rate, reducing repo rate. Do you know what repo rate means?
Yes, it's the interest rate at which the Reserve Bank takes.
Yeah, so it's the interest at which Reserve Bank lends to the banks. Okay, so it keeps adjusting that repo rate depending on inflation kya hai, depending on economic situation kya hai, things like that. And so people are always eager to know what the hell is, what are they doing with that repo rate, because the banks then lend to us according to that repo rate. अगर RBI ने कम कर दिया, banks को भी कम करना पड़ रहा है. You understand? So my fixed deposit now hardly gets any interest rate, right? Also in advancing economies. We are an emerging economy, but we're also advancing. Let's not look at Corona period, but we are an advancing economy, right? So if you look at places like Japan, which is a completely developed economy, it's the other way around. My fixed deposit earns interest of -1%. That means I'm giving bank the money ki please mera paisa thik tarah se rakho. You understand? Because they don't need it. Nobody needs it. You understand? But here I need my money to earn, to work for me. So I need some returns from that. And the bank, which at one point of time gave me an interest of even 10% or lately 8%, has now come down to just 6 or 7%. Okay. It does show that our economy is moving ahead as well. Okay. But these are the kind of back and forth things that happen with the interest rates. Okay. So you guys should be aware of basically these kind of things that are happening with the economy, because everything, even our work and our field depends on, or every field actually depends on the economy. So can we start then? Are we back, all of us?
Yes.
Okay. So, you'll have to help me share my screen.
Yeah. Mamta, can you check?
I can't share yet.
Oh.
Correct?
Can you check again?
Yeah. नहीं.
नहीं हो रहा है?
नहीं. Okay. So like you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, now we're looking at this plague situation of 1897, where Bombay faced this massive plague called the bubonic plague. Okay. Now, what has this arisen from? Like we discussed earlier, we are going back to the housing situation, right? We have so many laborers in the city, so many workers in the city, all living in unhygienic conditions. Okay. They're living close to each other. They really don't have a very good sanitation system. They don't have a very good water supply, like drinking water supply system. And that is where this kind of dreadful or deadly impact takes place. Correct? So we faced this plague even in 1897, which forced the city to look at options or look at alternatives or look at taking steps to now providing housing, clean housing to them. So that's upgrading the situation in the city. Here also it's a picture of how they're sanitizing the place even then. It was bleach or something that they were spraying at that point of time. Okay. So the very first step that the city took was put in place the Bombay City Improvement Trust. If you guys want, I mean, of course, the lecture is getting recorded, but if you want to take notes, then you can just make a mention or write this down so that it stays in your mind. When you write down, it gets fixed in your mind. Otherwise, you'll forget and you might not go back to the recording ever. So it's better that you write down. Okay. So the very first step that the city took is created this BCIT, as we call it. You would have heard of it earlier. I'm sure it was mentioned sometime in your architecture career. Okay. So what was the task of this? The task has always been anybody, MHADA ho, government ho, housing board ho, Bombay housing board hai, Maharashtra housing board hai, जो भी housing board hai, their task has never changed. It has always been remove insanitary housing, develop. Now they're talking about northern part because at 1898 only that part was really not planned and really not looked at. Like I said, if you look at Nariman Point, if you look at the way that that has been planned, all that Art Deco houses there around Marine Drive, etc. And if you look at the Kalba Devi housing, they came from a different economic category of people. They came from Gujarat, they were traders, they were moneyed people. So their housing was slightly different. Also at Nariman Point, etc., it's colonial kind of housing that existed, where you had the white collar people staying. Then you move down in the city towards the north, where you come to Dadar and the extension, where because of the influx of people, the city had got into creating the railway lines. So the development took place along those railway lines, and that's how the city moved north in a linear fashion. The city is only that much, correct? We can't even move east and west. It has to be north and south. So that's the way the development took place. That's how the city grew. And you found that there's a lot of ad hoc housing happening more towards the north. And that's why the task was to remove insanitary housing, develop the northern part of the island to reduce overcrowding, and then creation of new housing projects. Okay. And the same initiative then they wanted to follow with other cities in the country. So the very first trust that came into place was the BCIT, and the BCIT again was looking at creation of affordable housing. Okay. Now let's look at the city, since we're talking about it so much. What is that area of our city? So on your screen, you can see 4355 square kilometers. What is the population? I'm sure we are much more than 22.8 right now. I'm not sure what the current figure is. Anyone can Google and find out? Or is that the right figure? Okay, whatever. So around 22.8 million people living in this area. but we are not uniformly distributed. What we really have to understand and get into is we're not uniformly distributed. So we can't do like a density calculation with just this area and just this population. We do have our share of green area, right? Ecology, no development zone that has been marked out, mangroves, forest, water bodies. We do have all that, as you can see on the screen. And what's left blank is the area which we have available with us to develop. Okay, but you see the kind of disparity that's there. We have 52% of the population who's living in slums, incest buildings like we discussed just now, and even on the pavements. Now, the question arises is, why are we doing this exercise? Why are we studying this? What is what is it that makes you sit up and say that we need to look at this focus? And this is the reason. The reason is that because out of the entire population, of course, 52 is what you get on official things. Some sites even say 60 to 70%, and some sites also say that that is also going to be increasing. Though now we've got remigration happening, so we really don't have any numbers with us. Okay, but yes, still we have, say, more than 50 or 60% of the population who is living in slums. And have you stopped to think what is the area in the city that is covered by slums? Okay, this is the kind of density. Look only at the bottom band. Okay, we see Bangladesh is the highest, then is Mumbai, Colombia, Singapore, Indonesia. So we're looking in India and in Mumbai specifically, because we are only going to be studying Mumbai, is around 31,700 people per square kilometer. That is the density we are in general looking at. And this is the growth of the city. What we were in 1981 to compare to what we are now, 2011 and beyond. Can you see the screen? This thing's coming away from me. Okay. So can you see how this yellow has increased? Correct? What is this yellow? That's the growth of the slums in the city. So when we could sort of manage it in this year, this is what has happened with it in current times. That's the way the slums have grown in the city. Okay. So this is now the area that is occupied by slums. This map we've got again from P.K. Das's study. Anything mostly related with slums we pick from P.K. Das's study, because he's done a lot of work in this area. So you can also pick up his book, which is called Chasing the Affordable Dream. It's there in the library. I am not sure if it's there for download online, or check his website. Uske office ke website pe shayad downloadable hai. So you can take a look. It's very essential that you read that study. It's called Chasing the Affordable Dream. Okay, that explains MADA, SRA, everything. So this is the slum map now. Okay, this is the area where 52% of our population is staying. So do you understand that disparity? In the remaining area, I have 50%, and in this small area, I have 50%. So now do you begin to understand the importance of why we have to understand this dichotomy of demand and supply of affordable housing, and why we need to look at it and why we need to study it? It's coming out of these numbers, right? So even if some of you are taking it up as your thesis topic, to make that argument, this has to be bang on. Okay, this is the area which is actually only 8.75% of the land area in the city, but it is housing such a large population. And that's why you want to look at an SRA, or that's why you want to look at whatever. It's one of the arguments that you can make. Okay. So now this is what the density is going to in these settlements. So as against 31,000 we saw earlier, it is around 42,000 per square kilometer in these settlements. Okay. Then we come to the cess buildings. Now we're looking at all these different categories. We don't have any data for the people staying on the pavement. Okay. But if you see again, these cess buildings now are concentrated on the southern side of the city, because they were all built before independence. These are all buildings that were built before 1940. And to answer, let me just show you. To answer that question, yeah, so we have certain buildings that were built before 1940. We'll look at this in detail when we do dilapidations. Then we have class B that was built between 1940 and 1950. And then a class C that was built between 1950 and 1969. So we are looking at this class A that was built before 1940. Okay, those are the cessed buildings because that was the period when the Cess Act was put into place. That is, we had to collect a tax, a repair cess. Okay. So these cess buildings, like you see, that were built prior to 1940, are situated at the southern side of the city, and that was built at the time of the colonial period. Okay. So now we're looking at 16,000. Like I said, you can get this list online. Okay, this list is published. Is there on MADA website? Is there online? I think is there on the MCGM website. The MCGM website gives you the different categories of the cess buildings as well, depending on their condition. Okay, so some are dangerous buildings. I don't know if you've been walking, when you've been walking around, seems like a different era now. When you were walking around on the road, you probably had come across a couple of buildings which had this board mentioning that this has been declared as a dangerous building by the MCGM, and those staying in that building are doing so at their own risk because they have been served eviction notices, but they're not leaving that building because they're obviously not sure of getting back their own place of residence. Okay, so there are around these 16,000 buildings which are really in deplorable condition. Like I said, the technical term is state of disrepair. Okay, and that's why we need to look at them to revive what I call as reviving that housing stock in the city. Okay. So this is again a statistic which is brought out by Praja. Praja has 2 volumes that they have published on the policies in the city. If you want, I can share them with you. I can put it on a class email ID so those who want to go through it for their thesis or whatever can refer to it. Okay, and they are giving you this data. So 28.3 lakh households in Greater Mumbai, out of which 11.36 reside in slums. Census data is now showing a fall in the percentage of slum population. Now there are 2 reasons for this. One reason is that we really couldn't take in anymore, right? By the time we reached 2018, 17 and 18, we really couldn't take anymore, and there was actually data showing that the migrants coming into the city have reduced or even come to a stop. Right now, one aspect is that some of them have been upgraded also, right? If you see the people staying in the slums, they have moved to SRA, they have moved elsewhere, which is why that actual slum population data seems to have reduced. We're really not very sure. Okay. Then, like we said, there are 15,274 households who are living on the pavements or in pipes. Okay. So what is the deficit? We're looking at a deficit. We need to cover that deficit. 11.57 lakh formal dwelling units are required to house the existing slum and houseless population. We are still looking at an increased growth in population. We're looking at a population expected to touch 1.5 crore in the next 20 years. Okay. So what is it that the government is doing to address this housing situation? That's going to be the focus of our study for the 5th year. Okay. So yes, so going back to that bubonic plague and what the city had to suffer, they realized one thing. Apart from forming of the trust and the trust not actually being able to do much, they realized that the need of the hour is a master plan. Okay, that means we really had to have a development plan to look at how the city is going to grow. and how the city is going to accommodate these new members or these existing members without damaging the ecology and the environment in the city. You're very well aware that we have already depleted our mangrove stock in the city, correct? Our coast was rich of mangroves, but we have dumped our waste on it. One very easy way of reclaiming or reclaiming that land for construction is to go and dump all the construction waste into the mangroves. Then you say that the mangroves have all got damaged or whatever it is, and then you start construction in that place. Now, this is not an official statement that I can tell you and give you some hardcore data on this, but we can see this happening with our own eyes all over the place in the city. We've also had our CRZ norms being relaxed, okay? They've been relaxed to the extent where CRZ 500 meters था, फिर 100 meters हो रहा है, फिर 50 meters हो रहा है, फिर कोई coastal road बोल रहा है, फिर कोई बोल रहा है कि मैं landscaping कर रहा हूँ. I mean, we've always found ways and means of getting around to do this, and somehow we are still depleting the quality of life in the city with all this, okay? So the first plan that was made was can you see that? Can you read on the screen, or should I zoom a bit?
We can read, we can read.
Yeah. So the first plan that came up was the Modoc-Meyer master plan. Two intelligent people who came together to prepare this plan. You can get on the net. I can share it with you, and you take a look at how they're trying to look at the transportation and the growth in the city. So that's why they call it an incremental growth plan. Okay. We have only 10 minutes, but it's okay. We can do it next time. So that was the very first thing that was looked at. It was never implemented because by the time they sort of worked on it and prepared it, they realized that it's all is getting redundant. So they didn't actually implement it. But then, like I said, the Rent Act had already come into play by 1940. This is in 1948. Rent Act was already put in place. And because the buildings were getting into a dilapidated condition, what happened next is a housing board was put into place. So there was a Bombay Housing Board, then came the Maharashtra Housing Board. So if you want, you can just write these down, okay? Just write the names of these boards or the names of these planning tools. Write down Modoc-Meyer Master Plan, write down Maharashtra Housing Board, Bombay Housing Board, okay? Let's not go into these acts. So yeah, so this development plan, like you mentioned, it's sought to limit that population, okay, in that specific area, correct? So it's looking at the basic thing that what does a development plan do? The basic thing it looks at is zoning. So you create those different zones. You have ecologically sensitive zones, you mark them. You have your water bodies, you mark them. You have your rivers, you mark them. You have your coast, you mark it. You have your transportation lines, you mark it. And that's how then you look at the population. Then you look at the residential compared to the commercial, and then you start zoning out those areas. So a lot of the area has been demarcated or allotted for residential, but you have a lot of commercial which is already existing. So you try to accommodate that also within that development plan. Okay, so basically a development plan is looking at an existing land use plan, a proposed land use plan. Even if you see the DCR 2034, you will find an ELU and a PLU. Okay, that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to decongest the city at any cost. Okay, then there are a lot of acts which came into place. Like I said, we'll go through that a little later. So what you need to do is, yeah, look at this. Okay, before we wrap up today. Okay, so there's a Bombay Housing Board that was created to look at all these buildings that had gone into a state of repair. So they were looking at maintenance of these buildings. Now what happened is they first segregated themselves into different boards, and then finally they again combined themselves and formed MHADA. There was a Bidekar committee that was set up in 1968, which also looked at building repairs and reconstruction. Okay, and finally these bodies got together and they merged and became what is called as MADA. Okay. Now MADA is looking at, what is MADA looking at? It's looking at creation of housing in different sectors. It's looking at housing in a higher income group, medium income group, low income group, EWS, and what originally was a BPL, that is below poverty line. So there were these many categories. Now, when we do MADA in detail, we'll understand that the kind of income group that we see for below poverty line was changed. So finally, they made BPL redundant. कि अभी BPL है ही नहीं हमारे पास. Everybody is either economically weaker section or the lower income group. So we have now only these 4 categories, and MADA was allotted to provide a certain percentage of housing in each of this category, where LIG and EWS obviously had a larger share. MADA also now has to look at cessed properties, repair and maintenance, and even SRA is coming under the fold of MADA. Okay, all that is coming under the fold of MADA, because again there was no way to sort of control what was happening in the SRA. So for MADA, we are going to look at the different ways in which MADA tries to provide for this affordable housing, either on its own or, like I said, because it's unable to carry it on its own because of lack of funds and lack of land. The Land Acquisition Act is going to play a very important role in this, in MADA, because MADA had to bring in that Land Acquisition Act to be able to acquire land to provide this housing. So there had to be a cap that had to be put on people, private people or private organizations owning land. And that, you must be aware, is known as the Urban Land Ceiling Act. Okay, this Urban Land Ceiling Act was put in place to ensure that all the land didn't get into the hands of private players, and the government was able to hold on to a certain share of land. So some land was made available to MADA with the help of the ULCA, as we call it. But it also happened that there were some exemptions in the ULCA Act. And through those loopholes, again, there were private people who were able to acquire more land. So in effect, that act actually failed. That land didn't succeed in bringing large parcels of land under the government's fold. So that act had to be repealed. We'll be looking at that also. Okay. Now going back, how much time we have left? Any questions so far? Any question? Because next time I'll be beginning now with the Easements Act. We'll do the Easements Act in detail. Then we'll do the land acquisition. And then we'll get on to MADA. Any questions before I really go about getting into details of other things? So I can share these charts with you so that you have it ready with you and you can refer to it at any point of time. And like I said, we have these examples. I'll just show you quickly. Yeah, so we'll see how land was procured. By MADA, we'll do an analysis of the housing and the current redevelopment scenario, how that FSI works for MADA. Okay, so we'll be looking at all this. We'll be looking at a couple of case studies.
Mamta had a small question.
Yeah.
What category do the BDD chawls in Mumbai come under? Do they come under any such categories?
Yes, they're also the cessed.
Okay.
They're also CEST, okay? So they are undergoing massive redevelopment, not yet on ground, but yes, calculations and whatever are being prepared. Yeah, and I think Dave has done his thesis on the redevelopment of BDD also. If you want to refer to that, you can always refer to his thesis. Of course, he's looked at artificial intelligence of tackling it. You can take your own call on it. So we have a case study for CES. There's a Khanke building in Dadar that we have done, which you guys can use. And there are some SRA case studies which have been done, which you can use. And then we can sort of have a debate or discussion. Like I said, we are not doing any case studies. We're not doing any study for PP this time at all. No outside work. Okay. Any other questions? Because we're running out of time, then I can take it up from next time. Are you okay with doing classes like this?
Mamta,
Yeah.
one thing students wanted to ask was like how many classes are going to be conducted? Like what would be the number of classes if it's going to be 1 hour every Monday?
So there are 16 classes that we are supposed to conduct as part of the university, whatever requirement. 16 weeks, 16 classes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, but I'm not sure of what the attendance system is going to be or what it's going to be, because I don't really think online we can make attendance compulsory. There's no way we can do that. It's not right.